In the case of the Eritrea, for example, there is this wonderful drawing where he works out actually in a pen and wash drawing the drapery of this figure. He has a model in mind sitting in that pose, but you can see also from the different states how much he works out the single parts of the drawing, what he's interested in, and according to this, he then also chooses and changes the technique.
We still have some of the drawings that Michelangelo made as he was working out the central and most famous image of the whole ceiling. The moment when God gives the spark of life to Adam. Michelangelo creating God, creating Adam. He chooses the moment just before Adam receives the spark. Their fingers have not quite touched. How, he must have thought, could he convey the sense of latent energy about to be released in the muscular body of this perfect first man?
That is the sort of pose, but if we now look at the drawing, I think actually his whole idea about this drawing is to get this huge arc which runs through the body and is part of the massive design that he was looking to create on the ceiling. Are you able to bring this arm closer towards your body? Yeah, not really, no. You can see it's virtually impossible. An invention to a large extent. How are you feeling? Rough. This figure is at this moment lifeless because God is supposed to be giving the figure life. And now we've got this vast chest, and running right through it is this huge curve that is important to this, and the huge expanse. When we come to actually start to look at a Michelangelo painting or drawing, we suddenly realise that he's got inside the form, straight into the middle of the form, and the contours find their way. Look at this, that's inside the form. And the line is the contour, if you like, comes out of that understanding. Look at that knee and the way it comes back at such a sharp angle there. The way he searches out power and form, and it's just unbelievably exciting.
Michelangelo's finished designs had to be translated from a small, sometimes tiny sketch on paper to a huge painting on the damp plaster of the fresco ceiling. The ceiling is 20 meters off the floor and the size of a football pitch, so the figures had to be really monumental.
This is a little sketch of the hand of God, almost a doodle, that is going to end up huge on the Sistine ceiling. And this piece of paper is actually about the size of the little sketchbook that he did lots of ideas in. Perhaps the next stage would be to do it life-size. Then you put a grid of squares over the drawing. And then if you're going to do it, say, 4 times bigger, you would then do the same number of squares, but they'd be 4 times bigger. And then you could prick it like that. This is a marvellous job for an apprentice because you're actually going over the work of a genius and learning an awful lot at the same time, so it would be great. I mean, I've learned a lot trying to do this, and it must have been terrific. You take a bag of charcoal dust and rub it over the damp plaster. You've got to bear in mind the plaster has got to be just at the right level of dampness. There it is. So you could then fix that with thinned paint, and it looks wonderful.
By 1516, Michelangelo was back in Florence. Julius II had died the year after the Sistine Chapel was finished, and the new Pope, Leo X, was a Medici. The Pope had called Michelangelo back to Florence to work here, on the Medici family church of San Lorenzo. Initially, the idea was that he would design a facade, but attention soon switched to the funerary chapel and the family tombs. We still have the drawings Michelangelo made as he designed the 4 tombs for the chapel, and his studies for the sculptures that would decorate them. This is the Medici Chapel. The architecture and most of the sculpture was designed by Michelangelo to house the tombs of 4 members of the Medici family, although like so many of his works, it remained unfinished. Here, for over 100 years, masses were said day and night for the souls of the Medici. For us, the most interesting figure in the chapel is Day, who, with the figure of Night, reclines on the tomb of Giuliano de' Medici. This is the earliest known study for the whole figure of Day, showing the arm started in a different position. Marks and lines on the side of the drawing suggest Michelangelo was working out the figure's proportions and the size of the block he would need to carve it. It's marvellous, of course, to be able to look at the real thing in detail, but there's something that only television can allow us to do, which is to go from the sculpture to the drawings and back to the sculpture. And from that, I think something very interesting emerges, that Michelangelo is drawing not just a body, but a marble sculpture of a body, and a marble sculpture for a particular place and in a particular light. Michelangelo's concern for the back of the sculpture wasn't just about attention to detail. It was also about the angle from which it would be viewed. For this is a church without a congregation, and the whole thing, architecture and sculpture, was conceived with only one spectator in mind, the priest saying Mass at the altar.
If we take these drawings for the back, there's a wonderful sense of a multiple line that runs around the edge of the form, as if each little bit of musculature is slightly emphasized above its reality, which gives a sense of movement to it and a sense also of the three-dimensionality of the curve. He's talking also about something that's almost out of sight on the other side of the curve. The observed anatomy is terrific, with these veins that run through in the drawing, and then they appear in the back of the marble carving. It's a real eye-opener in terms of a translation of a drawing into 3 dimensions. Absolutely marvellous.
Michelangelo's design for the chapel was never fully realised. In 1527, the Medici were once again expelled from Florence. Michelangelo once again embraced the Republican cause and stopped work on the chapel. The empty niches tell their story, as does the unfinished sculpture. The political situation drove Michelangelo into hiding. We think he was helped by the family of one of his students called Andrea. And from this time we have a sequence of drawings that involve us in the private life of Michelangelo. We first meet Andrea on a study page. Michelangelo, the teacher, has set the boy a traditional task, copying the master's own drawings of eyes and faces. Andrea, abbi pazienza, wrote Michelangelo. The boy was almost certainly Andrea Quaratesi, young son of a patrician Florentine family.